the next section of Module 3, we're going to go ahead and talk about HTML layout tags. Now, the layout tags that we actually have set up here today that we're going to work with actually won't create any sort of stylistic changes over here on the right. So today we're actually going to learn how to create a menu section, a header section, general body sections in the middle of the site, and then a footer section at the bottom. Now, the interesting thing about this is that as we add in our sections on the left, you actually will not see any style changes applied on the right-hand side. You will not physically be able to see those sections. The reason why is because we actually haven't styled them just yet. Next week, in the next module, we're actually going to learn how to apply CSS styles to change background colors for each of those sections, font colors, widths, all that fun stuff that actually applies the visual changes that we need to see. So for now, we're just setting up the structure so that we'll be able to style later on in the next week. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with some of those layout tags. Now here on the left, I have a really simple layout that we have set up actually from the last class. So from Module 2, if you guys remember, and actually from the beginning of Module 3 as well again, our typical HTML template here, and we have 3 links inside. So inside of those 3 links, what I want to do is enclose that inside of a menu tag. So I have a nice little section I can style next week. So I'm going to create a menu tag right before the first link, and then I'm going to close the menu tag right after that. Now remember what I mentioned earlier on about indenting and tabbing. So whenever you have one HTML element nested inside of another, in the same way that we have the menu and we have links or anchor tags nested inside of that, you always want to tab in. So what I'm going to do is actually take all these links here, and I'm going to hit my tab key on my keyboard to show that the links are inside of the menu tab. Alright, so I have my general menu section all set up. Now over here on the right, you don't really notice any style changes applied. You don't see a menu section, but it's there. Remember, the styling comes next week. Okay, so the next section we're going to create is the header section. Now the header section is usually the next section that comes typically in the web design process. It can change around, but typically the header is the one that comes next, and it holds more often than not the name of the website, sometimes the logo, sometimes it has background images, the name of the company or the project you're working on. So really the top level information. So what we're going to do inside of the header is add an H1. Since that's our biggest, boldest title, it's usually used for important information. And we're going to type, this is my header section. Right? And as soon as we type that, we'll be able to see this is my header section show up. Now the H1 we added in, we cannot physically see the header section, but we know it exists because we can see the H1 inside of it. So we have a menu section with links, we have a header section with an H1. The next section that I'm going to add is sort of general. I don't really know what I want it to hold just yet. It can hold images, it can hold text, it can hold video, it doesn't really have a name to it yet. And really from website to website, the next section varies so greatly that HTML actually has a general section tag. So that's what we'll use next. We'll use the section tag. Remember, we typically use this for the main body of the web page's content. So things like images, text, video, audio, video games, anything, or online games, anything of the sort that you would like to add to that class, you can. Now inside of that section, what I'm going to do is add a paragraph in there that tells me that I have that section and it's loading. So I'm going to say this paragraph is inside my section. And I'll be able to see that over here on the right hand side. Perfect. Now sometimes when you have sections, you'll be able to style the entire background image or the background color for that section, but sometimes you have other sections nested inside almost in column format. So because of that, you actually can do subsections. And in HTML, those are actually called divs or dividers. So inside of the section, I'm going to create a div tag. And inside of that div tag, I'm going to add a paragraph. And that paragraph is going to say, this is my first div. And I see that over here on the right. Now on the next line, I'm actually going to copy this whole section, this div, and create a second subsection inside of there. And I'm going to say this is my second div. Right? So I can see first div and second div. So I see my general section here, right? This paragraph is inside my section. I see this is my first div, and I see this is my second div. Perfect. Now the last thing I need to add in is my footer. So on the next line, I'm going to create a footer tag. I'm sorry. Now remember, the footer section is always the last section of your website. It typically holds copyright information. It can also hold information such as contact info, like an address of a company, a phone number, social media links. So inside of here, I'm going to add a paragraph. And inside of that paragraph, I'm going to say this paragraph is inside of the footer. So I know what it is that's showing. Nope, let me make sure it's spelled right. Great, so I have my paragraph set up. I have my div set up. Now there's one more thing I want to do before I finish that off. And that's making these divs different. So I have two divs. Next week when I'm ready to style them, I actually can't style them individually because a div is a div is a div. They're both exactly the same. So what I can do when I have multiple HTML items that are exactly the same and I want to style them differently is I give them a special name. The way I give them a special name is with the class attribute. So remember from last week or earlier on in the module as well when we were talking about links, attributes are actually extra settings that you can change inside of an opening tag of a section. So what I'm going to do is inside of this div, I'm going to give it the class attribute and set it to equal to first. And the second div, I'm going to give it another class attribute and give it the name second. So remember that the class attribute is just giving this div a name so that I can style it later on. So that I can say this first div subsection here, I want to give it the background blue. The second div section right over here, I want to give it the background red, so that way they can be styled completely differently. All right. So now that I have that all set up, that's pretty much it. So I have my HTML layout all set up with my menu. I also have my header. Here is my large section with two subsections inside, right? I have my div with the class first and the div with the class second. Remember, classes are just ways of naming individual HTML elements so that you can style them all completely differently. And my very last section is my footer section here. And the footer section, remember, is usually reserved for copyright information, contact information, and social media links. All right, so with that being said, that was it for this video, and we'll see you guys for the next one.